What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Actuali Podcast. I'm Chris,
I'm DJ.
and today we are going to learn about the Socratic Method. Seems like it would be quite an aid for us in this time of meaning crisis, this time of increasing ongoing social division and discord. We're looking for a way to seek truth. As my girlfriend Kim put this, how do we need a method of questioning and seeking truth in this era of internet and social media amidst rapid technological advancement and artificial intelligence, where fact and fiction are harder and harder for us to determine at face value. I love the way that she put that. She's studying this in school as we speak. As an educator, it's unfortunate that the Socratic Method is no longer taught to the general public. It's only if you're going to be an educator or you're getting into philosophy or you're getting into law that you would learn the Socratic Method in depth. And this, I believe, is something that can be an antidote to the chaos of our times. It can help us to ameliorate our divisions, to heal our divides, to understand one another, and to get closer and closer to the truth together, rather than finding ourselves in these pitched battles along ideological and tribal lines. And doesn't it feel like we've been becoming increasingly fragmented in the last few years or so? And that's not good for our social cohesion. That's not good for the children of the future or for ourselves today. And so let's try and find a way to assuage that anxiety and that growing discontent with one another by seeking to understand one another. So, and I actually asked Grok 3.0, it's friggin' impressive, to describe how important the Socratic Method is in this time of increasing technological advancement, artificial intelligence, internet, social media, all of that. And it put it really well here. The Socratic Method, questioning assumptions, probing for clarity, and seeking truth through dialogue, remains profoundly important in today's era of internet, social media, so on and so forth, perhaps more vital now than ever, precisely because distinguishing fact from fiction has become so challenging. In this digital landscape, information floods us at an unprecedented pace. Social media platforms amplify voices, credible or not, while algorithms prioritize engagement over accuracy. We all know this to be a fact. We've all experienced the casino-style addiction peddling techniques that Facebook and Instagram and all of them have been using, often blurring the lines between truth and sensationalism. And then Grok goes on to say, AI like me can generate content that's convincingly real or entirely fabricated, further muddying the waters. The speed of tech advancement outpaces our collective ability to verify what is trustworthy, leaving us vulnerable to misinformation, deepfakes, echo chambers, so on and so forth. So let's get a good definition of the Socratic Method now to make sure that we got a good handle on this. What is the Socratic Method? Why are we calling up this 2,000 plus year old sense making technique? Well, let's check it out. The Socratic Method is a form of inquiry developed by, of course, the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates. This was depicted in Plato's dialogues. It involves asking series of probing, open-ended questions to stimulate critical thinking, expose contradictions, and guide individuals towards a deeper understanding or truth. So here's the breakdown. The core features involve questioning. Socrates used questions to challenge assumptions, often leading interlocutors to question their own beliefs.
And open-ended questions at that as well.
Yes.
That allow the person to lead themselves further into it.
Yes,
opposed
absolutely.
to closed-ended.
To find the insight on their own. Yes. And refutation. This is a technique of cross-examining an idea or belief to reveal flaws or gaps, often resulting in aporia. Some of you may recognize that term back from when we were covering John Vervaeke's Awakening from the Meaning Crisis series. Aporia is a state of puzzlement or uncertainty. Collaborative dialogue. This one is really important. It's not about winning debates, but fostering mutual exploration, typically between a teacher or facilitator and students or peers. And the goal, of course, is to seek truth together, to clarify concepts like justice or virtue or what have you, and encourage self examination, often without providing direct answers. That's what DJ was referring to with the open ended questioning. This helps us discover insights on our own. So, yeah, that's a great little
Mm.
synopsis there.
And there's like 7 steps you could go through. The first one being asking the open-ended questions, coaxing out of your interlocutor through questioning opposed to assertion. Then asking them to clarify their concepts. It's like, what do you mean by that?
So instead of just saying you're wrong and this is why you're wrong
Yeah.
and this is what's right, you're actually inquiring.
Yeah, like
Okay.
what has led you to believe this, or where did you find this, or so, and then there's the clarifying of the concepts. So, what did you mean by this? What do you mean by that? What do we mean when we're talking about this? Challenging the assumptions, like, oh, really, you believe that? And then, well, why? Another, right back to an open-ended question. Encouraging reflections on consequences. So, like, what are going to be the result if, say, we went down this road?
Okay, so what are potential results if we go in this direction?
Yeah, and so that will get the person into
really thinking about
yeah, and not just
the potential result,
catastrophizing, or on the other end, just being like, well, it'd be great, it'd be all hunky dory, it'd be fine. It's like, well,
actually helping you map out the territory,
so
the problem space,
both ends. And then looking at it from different perspectives. So, like, like the whole putting yourself in someone else's shoes, or
seen from other perspectives,
or asking him to, like, say, like, hey, Steelman, the
defend
opposite of your argument.
That's Steelman, to defend the opposing argument, make sure that you understand it.
Yeah, and basically making the argument in the most solid way as possible. So the opposite of a straw man, right?
Yeah,
whereas a straw man is just this flimsy.
So that the person that you're having the dialogue with says, yes, that's it. You got it. You understand what I
exactly
believe, or what I'm putting forth here.
And so then you move into the refining these ideas. So, like, now that we've got these ideas, let's go further and go around. And Dialogos does this very well with larger groups of people. And no simple answers.
No simple answers.
There are no simple answers. There is no black and white.
Right.
There's no just good or just, like, say, like, even, multivitamins, or even your food, there's always a downside to it. Like, maybe your stomach doesn't really like the leafy greens too much, or maybe, it gives you gas, even though, cabbage is great and everything. It does make you a little gassy, or, or the medication that keeps you from going absolutely crazy also might make you, list of side effects.
Right. So let's see how the Socratic method can aid us in times of social division and ideological capture. So social division and ideological capture occur when communities or individuals become deeply entrenched in fixed beliefs, often rejecting opposing viewpoints due to polarization, echo chambers, or groupthink. These dynamics can lead to hostility, misunderstanding, and stalled progress on shared challenges. The Socratic method, with its emphasis on questioning and dialogue, offers a powerful tool to bridge divides, challenge rigid ideologies, and foster understanding. So here's how it can help us today. It can help us in exposing our assumptions and biases. The Socratic method uses open-ended, probing questions to uncover unexamined assumptions, I should say, or biases that fuel division. By asking questions like, what evidence supports your view on this issue? Or, can you explain why you believe this policy is unjust? It's a way of gently encouraging individuals to reflect on the foundations of their belief. I love this, the gentle encouragement.
Well,
we're inviting somebody into a dialogue to figure this thing out together rather than just get into this oppositional framework.
Yeah, and I guess, like, this is grok and it's pretty blunt, but, can you explain why you believe this policy is unjust? Like, I've seen people ask questions like that and they have a pretty bad response to it. Like, it's like, oh, you're challenging me. It's like, well, no, like, so like,
Right, right.
have to be tactful. And I guess like the tone in which you're asking that question can really help soften it a little bit too. Like,
So a genuine curiosity. We
yeah.
got to catch ourselves and our own emotionality. And
Well, and that's one thing. So, like, if you guys watch Timcast, you'll probably be familiar with this guy, Alad Eliyahu. He's like their resident neocon reporter, that's not a slur, neocon. He admits that he's neoconservative. But one thing that gets me, and he doesn't do this when he's interviewing people like live and out and about, but when it's a one-on-one, more confrontational thing, his questions he has a tinge to his voice that makes it very accusational, even though the words themselves aren't.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gets me a little bit. And this is nothing against him. It's just, it's a tonal pattern that I notice sets me on edge. So if I was asked a question like that, and it also makes me try to be more aware of how I'm asking questions.
Yeah, because we could be doing the same thing sometimes.
Yeah.
I know I've fallen into that trap before myself. Very easy to fall into that.
So so what makes you believe that this is unjust? It's like,
right.
okay, now you're just being a jerk.
Right. You're right. That's a great point. So, yeah, why is this policy unjust? So the benefit, of course, of using these open-ended probing questions is that in polarized debates, such as those around climate action, social equity, or public health, it reveals shared values such as fairness, safety, beneath the opposing stances, reducing adversarial tension. This is basically getting to understand each other's value orientations. And then, I like the example they give here. If two groups disagree on a resource allocation policy, a facilitator might ask, what would convince you to consider the other side's perspective? This could expose fears or misinformation or biases that are already held, driving the disagreement, opening a path for dialogue. Of course, the Socratic method can also, help us break ideological capture. Ideological capture happens when people adopt beliefs uncritically, and this is a lot easier to do than we would suspect. It often happens due to social pressure or propaganda, which is on all sides of the media. The Socratic method's refutation technique challenges these beliefs by probing their consistency or evidence. Questions like, if this approach benefits one group, does it also harm others? And is that fair? Or, what would disprove your position? Helps individuals recognize contradictions or gaps in their own reasoning. For the benefit here, this disrupts echo chambers by encouraging critical examination of dominant narratives, fostering a willingness to reconsider entrenched views. For instance, in discussions about economic policies, questioning might reveal overlooked data or unintended consequences, softening one's ideological rigidity. Yeah, really, really great example there. And then 3, building empathy and community, something we need so bad right now.
And real empathy, not the
real empathy, yeah.
Just
not forced empathy, fake empathy, pretending to care.
I think virtue signaling would be like a function of faking empathy in a way to gain attention and enhance one's virtue, at
seeming
least
virtue.
Seeming virtue, yeah.
Yeah, it's a way of shouting out to your community, or to the community that you want to be seen as belonging to. That's like, hey guys, I'm over here. I'm doing the good thing too.
Yeah, I actually really care about all the starving people.
So we talk about it on social media without really doing much about it besides arguing on social media. So we're just signaling virtuous ideals without really trying to live up to them. And that's challenging for all of us, myself included. It's hard to live up to these high-minded ideals that we strive for, but that's a trap for us too. So building empathy and community. The method emphasizes collaborative dialogue. I love this. And active listening, not confrontation. Questions like, can you share why this issue matters to you personally, or what experiences shaped your perspective? Invite vulnerability and understanding, humanizing opposing viewpoints.
Opposed to dehumanizing.
Yes, because we're doing a lot of dehumanizing nowadays. And the only reason that you dehumanize somebody to any great extent, or any group to any great extent, is to be able to excuse increasing levels of retaliation, including violence.
And
We're really kind of egging ourselves up and getting ourselves fired up and ready.
I think it also makes it um, more palatable to quote unquote do the work that you're supposed to be doing, uh, whatever your ideology is telling you, because it's hard to do something harmful to somebody you care about, and if you care about humans, you care about them. But if your quote unquote work requires you to do harm, like revolutionary communists, or fascists, or the National Socialists, they can dehumanize the other person and totally get away from that burden of doing harm to somebody they care about.
Mm-hmm.
Because sometimes you do have to do quote unquote harm to people you care about, like say like an intervention for like drug addiction or something like that.
Yeah.
It's
It's going to trigger some emotional
ultimately
response.
it's to help, but it is going to be in that moment harmful. But you will feel bad for doing it. Or like, the whole like, spanking your kid when it's like, this hurts me more than it hurts you. Whap,
Right,
whap,
right.
whap kind of thing. Not saying, you should go like beating your kids or nothing like that, but I'm a little old school. But yeah, so this dehumanization is it's basically a way that we can facilitate our ideological capture one way or another. It makes you feel better. But if you get through if you get to the process of humanizing the other side, then naturally you won't be doing the work of your ideology because it is too uncomfortable, and the juice is not worth the squeeze at that point.
Right. Yeah.
So because ultimately humans are lazy. Like we gear towards leisure and laziness. That's why we have all the technology we have, and
right. And we also certainly gear towards confirming our already held biases, because this is our framework for reality.
yeah,
Our understanding of
I'm
reality
comfortable
is,
here. Don't make me uncomfortable.
yeah, don't make me have to rethink everything that I believe, because that's a scary concept to us. We feel like the ground is being pulled out from underneath us.
So perhaps, like you could say, it's almost a natural response to dehumanize, and it's a very ill-natural response to humanize. Because we are lazy, want to be comfortable. It's just easier to say, oh, those guys are just Nazis and fascists. Screw them. Opposed to be like, okay, well, even a Nazi and a fascist, like, they are still human. They're wrong. They're terribly, horribly, awfully wrong. Or, hey, commies, you commie bastards, you're wrong, but I still love you as people. You're still humans, and you still have a human intellect and human reasoning.
Yeah.
It's just reasoning in a direction that I find
I disagree with. I don't like what you're doing. Yeah. But that call of Jesus to love even our neighbors, that's a high level, man.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you excuse what they're doing, but you still have some sense of fairness and justice and care for even those who have done wrong. That's just such a high level of compassion. Anyways, getting off track. So building empathy and community. The benefit here, of course, is in times of social fracture, such as what we're going through as we speak, such as post-crisis tensions or cultural disagreements, it fosters connection by focusing on shared goals, like justice or prosperity, rather than adversarial positions. This builds trust and reduces hostility. I mean, I know this all might sound basic to you guys, but we're not doing this right now. We're not doing this at all in our country, at least en masse, and we have to. We really have to bring wisdom-guided dialogue back to the social arena. We have to engage in these conversations together. And boy, we can really decrease the amount of stress and pressure around these issues by coming at them with a posture or an orientation towards understanding and try and figure it out together, rather than taking on this oppositional dynamic that we are literally being tricked into, I believe, by divide and conquer methodology. So promoting critical thinking over emotion. Here we go. This is another key. By focusing on logic, evidence, and reasoned analysis, the Socratic method shifts discussions away from emotional reactions or tribal loyalty. Questions like, what data supports this claim? Or how does this align with your broader values? Encourages participants to prioritize facts over feelings. The The benefit here, this helps individuals move beyond knee-jerk reactions in polarized environments, examining issues like environmental regulations or healthcare reform with less bias. It prepares people for fresh perspectives, reducing the grip of ideological silos. That's awesome. Okay, now and finally, number 5, facilitating structured dialogue. The Socratic method can be structured through formats like Socratic seminars, wherein participants agree to ask questions rather than make statements, following rules like active listening and evidence-based reasoning. Brilliant. The benefit here, this structure is ideal for community forums, family discussions, or online platforms, addressing divisive issues, reducing shouting matches, and prompting mutual understanding. Creates a safe space for exploring complex topics like education reform or immigration policy. So there we are. And here's some great examples. Designing Socratic Seminars by John Spencer. Edutopia highlights how Socratic Seminars' ability to engage students in deep textual analysis. A model that can scale to public discourse, fosters productive discomfort and growth. Because you need a little bit of discomfort to grow sometimes. Like, there's two kinds of perplexity that humans can experience. My girlfriend was breaking this down for me. She's studying the Socratic method as we speak. And one is unclear, confusing information is a poor way to be perplexed, of course, but there's a good way to be perplexed. And it happens through the engagement with difficult ideas. It's part of the learning process. It helps us more deeply integrate knowledge. Now, if the process is not well articulated, students may feel shame or alienation. That's why we have to be very clear with what our value orientations are and very gentle with our questioning to understand those with whom we are having a dialogue. Now, realizing that one doesn't know something or that learning new info that challenges our beliefs is a step towards truth rather than a cause for shame is very helpful insight. Stultification can occur, of course, when such as intellectual subordination, when a teacher, for instance, is guiding students with leading questions, or the media is trying to present the news with leading assumptions to lead us to conclusions that are already determined by the presenter, causing us to have orientations or beliefs of the presenter rather than encouraging our own exploration and free thought. So stultification is occurring, I think it's pretty widespread right now in our society. We are effectively being dumbed down and reduced to angry mobs arguing at each other rather than listening or hearing or even caring to understand each other. We automatically have demonized the other side. Oh, why would I even want to talk with someone over there that thinks those things? Those people are racist or this or that.
Yeah, and
it's a way to dismiss with
it almost seems like, at least with this first part, that there is an active misuse, intentional misuse, scientifically intentionally misusing this idea by leading us, like every question that the news asks, well, don't you think this and don't you think that and other, is leading us not to a better understanding, but further away from each other. And it's not just happenstance, because all the news channels are saying the same exact thing over and over and over again. The new buzzword is was a constitutional crisis. No, so Chris, don't you think there's a constitutional crisis going on right now?
Well, aren't people that are like really interested in the Constitution, like this kind of thing, like super patriots that can be dangerous? Like these are nationalists to an extreme and like caring so much about the Constitution. Isn't that a bad
Don't
sign?
you know free speech caused the genocide?
I heard about that one recently. That's crazy. That so the Third Reich was actually suppressing speech, so it wasn't free speech that turned it into a totalitarian state. Free speech is the antidote.
But it's
but that's the argument you make when you're trying to create an authoritarian, totalitarian
actually
state.
a good example of a leading question that's used all the time if you're British, whether they realize it or not, is they'll make a statement and say, "Isn't it?
Isn't it?"
Yeah. Yes. Oh man, it gets me so bad because it's like it's so quick. It's in their just their common speech. It's not a malicious thing, but it also
It's like when we
forces
say
you
right,
to either
you know?
agree or disagree immediately when
Yeah,
it wasn't even a question. It
yeah,
was just a, you know, thing that they put at the end of their
yeah, yeah.
sentences. And also to a certain degree, it does work to
Invite you in.
a little bit, yeah,
Yeah.
and ask a question. It's like,
It's very conversational. It's very open.
yeah, oh,
Yeah.
the weather today
They're
is
trying to have a
beautiful, isn't
conversation.
it?
Man, they're trying to talk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They're inviting conversation when they say that. So there's a politeness to
But
it.
then there's the, what is her name? Kathy Newman on
Yes.
BBC, who will, like make it just a horrible statement, like when she was talking with Jordan Peterson
Oh,
all
I
those
remember
years
that.
ago.
Yeah.
And, it's like, well, what would it be? It's like, yeah, you cater to the, you cater to the far right, and it's a, strange thing that, all your followers are these far right, isn't it? And, it's just like, well, no, it isn't. And it's not that it's a strange thing, it's just not a thing, but,
She's framing it that way to make it appear as such.
yeah.
So we got some comments here from Ninja Bat. What's up, Ninja Bat? Welcome, welcome. So Ninja Bat says small communities always worked better. People knew their neighbors.
Even
That's
even within large cities, you'd have, like each building in each block, and you'd have, little Italy town and, little Chinatown and this, that, or the other. There was a little bit more of that, but now it's like, nobody goes out.
Yeah, we need to
anymore.
rebuild our connection with our local
Yeah.
communities because you're absolutely right. There is what's the term for it? I forget the name of the guy. But around 150 people or so is around the max that humans can be together
Yeah.
and be able to have tight knit, close communities with a very low rate of crime and this and that. Once you get past that number, it becomes increasingly difficult to manage. Uh, so yeah, finding a way to link ourselves together into small communities again would be very beneficial. I agree. And then Ninja Bat goes on to say, all this internet info overload is info overload. Yeah, I hear you, man. It is info overload. We're all constantly barraged with so much sensory input, information, bright, colorful, attractive graphics. Um, the food on the shelves, the McDonald's sign down the street, all of these things are designed to be super salient to grab our attention. And then, of course, the internet is that on overload. Yeah, we've been fear mongered times 1,000. Yeah, haven't we?
And I think that's of each other,
Yeah.
and our opinions differ.
Mm-hmm,
Well,
mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Trained to be fearful of each other if our opinions differ. Absolutely.
and it
Regardless of online platforms, we still need human contact and congregation.
sure,
Amen.
and that and I would go ahead and say that that's probably one of the things we really lost when we lost most people going to church, even if they weren't, super, super into Christianity, they would still go, and they would still do the thing. And then there would be the occasional Wednesday potluck, and everybody would get
Mhm.
together, and, congregate. The congregation would congregate
Mhm.
together. And I'm not saying we have necessarily go back to, the church thing, but we can use, we
That
could
model.
use that
Yeah.
model.
Yeah. Congregation in a sense of shared appreciation of this great mystery, this a sense of the sacred that I think we can all recognize, even if you don't formally believe in this or that God. You
Well, and the two questions
have a
to
sense
ask
of the
is,
miracle.
what would happen if we do, and what would happen if we don't?
Mm.
So if we don't,
We don't congregate, we
would
further fragment and fall apart.
yeah, like, or would you say we would develop something else to replace that, whether it be it, online cyber upload your brain in space, and it seems like the real world, but it's not.
Mm.
Could that be an option? I think it could definitely be an option, because you already have, like, remember VR chat?
Mm-hmm.
People would go in there and have their bad, bad avatars, like the really bad Ugandan Knuckles avatar in there, and people would hang out in that space, and
Mm-hmm.
not even really say much, but would be in there, and like in there in space, and in there as well as chatting. And if we do, I think we may risk, one of the risks to it is, if we swing too far and uh, only associate with our church or our congregation, and exclude everybody else looking too far in
Mm,
and losing, this. It is nice that we do have global reach within
hmm.
each other, but, and this is one of my fears is like, this swing back to the right, we might go too far. And one way could possibly be being super isolationist and only looking
Hmm.
into our own
Hmm.
little
Oh
communities.
yeah,
And if you're
yeah.
not in our community, we're not gonna we can't care about you
Right.
because we're only looking in.
Yeah, the pendulum can swing too far when we're overcorrecting.
Yeah.
So Ninja Bat goes on to say, our intuition and the feelings you get from others is important.
Yeah.
So shared belief, shared understanding, um, and then Ninja Bat says religion, morality must be the commonality.
Yeah.
So some sense of shared uh, morality
Sure. Yeah.
or spiritual practice. Yes. Yeah, I agree. We need to care in order to be able to be wise. And it's as Buddha said, it is not love that leads to wisdom. I'm sorry, it is not wisdom that leads to love. It is love that leads us to wisdom, or compassion, I believe is the term that's used. It is not wisdom that leads us to compassion. It is compassion that leads
Yeah.
us to wisdom, because compassion is the willingness to put yourself in other people's shoes, to see from other perspectives, even those who you previously might have abhorred.
Yeah. And morals are definitely a religious thing. We get our
Right.
morals from our religious teachings,
Right.
and then we write them down into ethics
Mm-hmm.
that we can live by.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so when we're talking about like, the ethical treatment of patients or something like that, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, it comes from the case in the West, Judeo-Christian moral values. Like the idea of like do no harm is very, very, very Judeo-Christian.
Right.
And then also being, don't want to say courteous of others, but mindful of the traveler or the guest.
Mm.
Like the idea of not gleaning the corners of your field. So as poor people or the traveling people moving through, they can still find a food source.
Mm. Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Yeah,
Is
yeah.
a good
Great point.
example of that. Morally speaking, the moral would be, look after the traveler and the guest, and then the ethic would be written down. This example of don't
Mm.
glean the corners of your field. I'm probably getting the language of it wrong, but it's basically that.
Right.
Um,
Alrighty. So now we could jump. So,
yeah.
getting back to the Socratic method, now we're going to actually utilize the Socratic method to look at an ongoing current event that's happening right now, as of today. The Socratic method, with its focus on questioning, dialogue, and critical thinking, is a powerful tool for navigating social division and ideological capture by exposing our assumptions, breaking rigid beliefs, building empathy, and promoting reason. It can help communities and individuals move beyond polarization, fostering a shared pursuit of truth and understanding. Whether in a classroom, community forum, or personal conversation, it invites curiosity and, keyword, collaboration, offering hope for healing divides in challenging times. Love it. Let's check it out. Let's look at how people are responding to RFK Jr.'s confirmation as the Director of Health and Human Services. Just in, and this is from Watcher Guru. Thank you, Kim, for sharing these posts with us today. U.S. government looks to ban the purchase of junk food using food stamps following Health Secretary RFK Jr.'s confirmation. Let's look at how people are responding. How about you make healthy food cheaper instead of the other way around? This is the real issue.
Well, I would have to
Mm,
say in direct response to that, it's the subsidies. Healthy food is not subsidized. It's the cheap food products, the corn, the soy, the chemicals.
Well, we can
That
ask
is
this person
subsidized.
too, like, how do you think we would go about doing
Yeah,
that? And,
well,
and what are some
exactly.
other
Yeah.
considerations that might limit our ability to do that?
Well, and to be fair, to see it from the well, we can't just make things free or cheap, and is well, good healthy food unless you're growing it yourself is pretty intensive to
Hmm.
grow in a large enough amount to feed the population that we're in.
Right, right.
That could be the argument against, just making the food the healthy food
Yeah, and understanding why do
cheaper.
we give such big subsidies to like sugar, for
Yeah,
instance,
yeah,
which
yeah.
makes sugar so cheap that it's often the cheapest thing you can buy on the store shelf. Instead of
Yeah.
getting something healthy, you can get, a candy bar. And then actually, we got a couple more to look at. So sorry, this is Delaney Vandergrift, funny name. Sorry, I think poor people deserve whatever food they want to eat, including junk food. Are y'all crazy?
Well,
So
what does he mean by deserve though? Because like,
okay.
yeah, like,
People, of course, I guess you could say, deserve the freedom to eat what they want to. But if other people are paying for it with food stamps, and if you're eating really unhealthy, and then, we're looking at millions and millions of Americans with diabetes, overweight, heart conditions, cancers that are further having to be paid for by the taxpayer.
well, wouldn't you say that deserve also it you
Y-
deserve something is something that you earn? You know, like
So you
you
did some,
deserve that trophy, you deserve the accolades. And this is part of the clarifying of the concept. Like the word that sticks out to me here is deserve.
well,
And
whatever. And I
yeah,
think, okay, we all
yeah,
deserve food to eat as human
yeah, yeah.
beings. Okay, you
But
could say
whatever
that as a
food.
blanket statement, but whatever food? How about nutritious food? Because I'm pretty sure. And so here's the question: how do we invite this person into Socratic dialogue?
Yeah.
How do we put this in a way that is
And
not
are
offensive?
y'all crazy? Probably, but you know, most of us are.
Yeah, yeah, I think we all are.
Sanity is
A
in
little
short
bit.
supply.
Yeah, yeah. All food is available to poor people. You're really saying wealthy and average people must pay for poor people to eat junk food, regardless of the wealthy and average people's consent. Not ethically clear at all. Many poor folks also hate the wealthy people who feed them. So here we're seeing the statements. People are, of course, are not, engaging in Socratic dialogue at all here. It's just a back and forth kind of thing. This is why we need this help. Um, Getting rid of non-healthy options and making only healthy options available also helps our farmers. Taxpayers shouldn't subsidize food that isn't rich in nutrients, junk processed food, so they can become more unhealthy and cost the taxpayers more via healthcare.
So what we're seeing here in these comments, or at least what I'm getting from it, is a lack of Socratic method.
Absolutely,
It's
yeah,
definite statement,
yep.
some vague concepts that are in there. And you know, I'm not trying to be a jerk
You
or
see how
nothing,
rare it
but
is for people to really try and engage in
yeah,
understanding dialogue.
yeah.
Like, and we have to lead the way in demonstrating how this can be done. We have to swallow our pride, take a deep breath, and really try to understand with actual compassion and interest. Get at the value orientations that are driving these kinds of claims so that we can, once again, be in an orientation of figuring this out together. Because we're always in this oppositional
Yeah,
defiance
yeah.
framework instead of, position yourself. Even mentally in your imagination, side by side with that person, trying to figure it out. And you'll notice that the way you phrase things, your tonality, everything changes. And then their actual
Hmm.
response to you is going to change as well. It helps tremendously because these are complex, difficult issues,
Yeah.
and we all seem to want to act like experts when we're on the internet, don't we?
Well, well, it's a lot less. It's a lot more comfortable to make a statement, even if after the fact you looked foolish.
Yeah.
Whereas asking being like, well, I don't know. Oh no, it's like you feel stupid by saying it, but in the long run, you're not going to be proven to be foolish by asking a question and admitting and just, I don't know how, here, help me,
Yeah.
please.
Yeah.
Here's a question.
So, how exactly do poor people deserve to spend more than most middle class families do on groceries? I personally don't like paying extra taxes so they can buy monster energy drinks. One can is more expensive than a 24 pack of water. This is way beyond providing food
So
security.
could you go back up to that for me real quick? Um, to the top.
Yeah, I'm
The,
trying
the,
to.
oh, no, no, not the top of the whole thing. The top of that picture.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah.
Yeah. So how exactly do poor people deserve? And you put deserve in
Quote
here because
unquote. Yeah.
in quotes, to spend more than most middle class families do on groceries. I'm not sure
It's a bit of a leading question. Yeah.
yeah.
Valid point, of course.
He's going to allow us to get into his shoes by
Yeah.
saying, I personally don't like paying extra
That's a fair
taxes
way to say
so
that.
they can buy Monster energy drinks. Now that's a good example of inviting somebody to
Mm.
um
engage in
into a
dialogue.
different
Yeah.
perspective. Like, okay, well, my perspective.
Mhm.
I really don't appreciate
And
this.
you're not putting this down as this is the absolute truth. You're saying,
Yeah.
well, from my perspective, it seems this way. So you're not saying it is. You're saying it seems to me. So that's helpful. That's really helpful. It's really hard to not make is statements,
Mm.
but we can. And if you catch yourself and watch yourself when you're writing, for instance, we do this all the time. Well, this is the way it should be, or this is the way it is. Try saying it seems like, you use phrases along those lines because
Perhaps,
you're basically
possibly.
putting forth the connotation that you are willing to be wrong and that you're willing to engage in conversation over this topic. I don't know why this one isn't trying to.
Oh no.
Yeah, there's been a lot more. No, we're not signed in. Go ahead and bring us back to full screen. I'm going to fix this right quick.
Yeah. So now with the question of should food stamps be paying for quote unquote junk food, we should probably define what junk food is, and maybe layers and degrees of what junk food is,
And
because
understand what is the food stamp program actually for.
yeah, because there are foods that are considered healthy foods that are really, like low nutrition value, like, that iceberg lettuce, technically not a junk food, but it really kind of is, as far as if you look at just pure nutritional value, right?
Yeah.
Now it does have, non-soluble fiber in it, which is good for you, in the proper amounts. But so the questions I have is what's considered junk food, and it's kind of like the prawn question. It's like, well, what's prawn? It's like, well, when you see it, but it's like,
see it, yeah.
well, no, not really though, because like, what if I get an all organic beef jerky, you know, jar of beef jerky strips that I used with my food stamps to when, like say the power goes out or something like that, and the food goes bad in my fridge, I have good nutritious beef. But a beef jerky stick is a junk food, like beef jerky was always like, now it's getting into the health food end because of the eat meat movement and all that stuff.
But it was a
which,
snack food, you would say.
yeah.
Maybe not junk food, but it was a snack food.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
What's the difference between junk food and snack food?
Well, okay, so being nutrient devoid or
Yeah.
void of nutrients, I think would be one way to say that it's junk food. It's merely for mouth pleasure. It's not for health. It's
Yeah.
not for nutrition.
Because you could say that obviously, soda, Coke is it's obviously a junk food. It has no nutritional value. It rots your teeth. It'll give you diabetes. That's easy enough. But then there's gray areas with that. And then there is, well, should other people who are not you be forced to pay for you to buy that? And that's a
And the medical bills down the road that you may end up having.
because, well, some people might be like, yeah, it's fine. I don't mind that my taxes go to pay for food, for them to eat quote unquote junk food.
What if you found out that it was billions of dollars a year that we're spending on cancers, heart disease, diabetes, and things related to eating too much unhealthy food?
And to get into a different perspective of the person who's on food stamps that wants to buy junk food, like, well, maybe I live in a neighborhood where it's 3 miles through, might get stabbed on the subway to go to a grocery store, and then I can only get a bag or two because I have to carry it all the way back. But there's a little bodega down the street that has stuff there, and it's mostly junk food, but then, maybe it's got a deli attachment to it or something like that, and I have to buy food there.
How did people find healthy food before the days of cars?
Yeah, well,
grocery store delivery. Didn't we have to walk miles oftentimes?
Yeah, and there is the argument of the food desert, but me personally, I believe that the heavy subsidies on the unhealthy, massive cereal grains and other stuff like that,
and on the sugar industry and so forth.
I think that has
we could put more
created
food
these food deserts
into even healthy food into even gas stations, 7-Elevens, Dollar General.
Oh yeah, we were able to get healthy food into cities long before we had refrigeration.
Yeah,
we
have more access to food now than we've ever had before. I mean, the food desert thing, that I'm certain exists more in some other countries, particularly third world, but here in the U.S., you are probably a pretty rare person, I would think.
So from the perspective of the person who say lives in the food desert
Yeah.
that really can't get to the Kroger's to get healthy food and has to go to the bodega, how would we facilitate more healthy groceries being spread out in these food desert areas? Like, how would we go about doing that? Because you can't just,
Say it doesn't
you
work
can't,
because there's food deserts.
or
Okay, how do we solve the
yeah,
food deserts?
and
I like it.
you can't tell Kroger's or Costco that you have to go. You can't force them to go to these locations, or if they
Right.
left because of crime and they were getting
Mm,
all their stuff robbed, you can't tell them, no, you're not allowed to leave.
mm, yeah,
Forgive me for the definite statements, but
yeah.
like that's it doesn't make any sense to even pretend to try to do that. If
Right. So your question, though, check out this post, and this is another one. Thank you so much, Kim, for sharing these. And hey, what's up? I see you in the chat.
Hey.
Hey. Yeah. So here we have Data Whisker, and he's actually looks like he's kind of using the Socratic method here. Interesting move in reply to RFK, know, taking junk food away from food stamp recipients. Interesting move, but the real question is, how do we define junk food in an
Yep.
era where even granola bars can pack more sugar than candy?
Mm.
That's a really
Yeah,
good point.
yeah.
I don't know if granola bars should be seen as a health food. Well, but yeah, that's a great point. Even granola bars have more sugar than a lot of candy nowadays. Lots of products out there, everything has sugar in it. Would love to hear thoughts on where we draw that line while still respecting people's dignity and choice in food assistance. Oh, that's tricky, man. Is somebody's dignity attached to being able to eat junk food?
Well, I would have to
And what is considered junk food? I guess we really do need to define junk food. So
yeah,
that's a fair
and
point.
perhaps there's a hit to one's dignity when you have to accept help to eat. I had a food stamps card for like a year and a half, and I fed like all my friends with it because they gave me way too much for
Mhm.
just me. And you know, once it ran its time, I didn't re up. I could have, but I didn't because I did not like it.
Full screen.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, all good. Yeah.
Yeah, long day. But I didn't like it. It made me feel kind of rotten. I'm the type of person I don't want your money, and I don't want to take more than I possibly have to.
Mm,
Um, which that's the dignity part, right?
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, that's a great question though.
Mm,
Would love to hear the thoughts on where we draw the line while still respecting people's dignity and choice in
yeah.
food, because that's the thing is, should they be able to choose anything they want? Like when you're on government assistance, should you be able to choose anything you want, or is it better that it's like, well, no, you have less options and maybe more, you know, more stores or services that to help you get that healthy food,
Yeah.
something like that. But this emotional just freaking out, it's like you're taking away from the poors. It's like, well,
I wonder if we
what?
could start subsidizing healthy food rather than the junk food industry so much. How
Yeah.
much that would help make those foods available to people in potential, food deserts.
Well, unfortunately, I don't think like any way we go about doing it, I don't think it's going to be a pleasant transition because there is
We're addicted,
much,
man.
well, so much
Yeah.
infrastructure massed around
True that too.
corn, because corn isn't just
Freaking everywhere,
animal
man.
feed or to be ground up to put in our food or to
Make
be
corn syrup out of it.
corn
and-
syrup.
Yeah.
The ethanol that you put in
Oh,
our
yeah.
car in
Did
our
you know
gas is
that the amount of corn that we have to grow to fill one tank
yeah,
for fuel
Yeah,
for a car is enough to feed a child for an entire year?
yeah.
That's insane.
Now you shouldn't feed them just corn.
No,
They
you
will die
definitely
from-
shouldn't. But if you got nothing else to eat, man, cornmeal is something. But
But-
yeah, man, that's sad, dude.
So there's a huge infrastructural question in
feel
this
like
as well. So
hemp has a role to play here.
yeah,
know?
and I was watching something, but instead of like taking away, like if say you're growing corn, okay, well we can grow the corn, but we can, instead of depleting the soil, say instead of taking the green parts of the corn, and what they do is they grind it up, make it into silage, and feed it to cows. You can put it back into the soil so that plot because like we do need corn. Like they're, like your tortillas, which are healthy for the most part, that's corn. Different kind of corn than like feed corn or alcohol corn or
Well,
popcorn
like
or
Indian corn, which is
yeah,
like
yeah,
multicolored.
heirloom
It's got
corns. Yeah.
darker colors to it, lots more
Hmm.
bioflavonoids and phytonutrients and
Yeah,
so forth.
so there's ways to go about it. It's just I think it's going to hurt no matter what we do. If we keep going, obviously it's going to
We
hurt.
have a multi-billion-dollar junk food industry.
But
Yeah.
I don't know if this not allowing junk food on food stamps is going to be this big catastrophe that it is being made up. I don't know. It could be, but I don't think so.
But yeah, and as
You
I
know, I think
understand
it'd
it,
probably
food
be
stamps
better.
were always there to provide nutrition to people that have trouble accessing
Mm,
nutritional foods because they are lower class, they don't have as much money. And so that's what the food stamp is for,
mhm.
is to make sure that people aren't in and out of the hospitals and the doctor offices with, sicknesses and illnesses because they're not able to eat healthy enough. So that's
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
what I always understood it was for. So now, and we learned this in episode 124 of this podcast. Look it up with Callie Means. We were looking at the poisoning of America, and he was a consultant for companies like Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola literally came up with an argument saying that not providing or not allowing poor people to be able to buy their Coca-Cola or their Pepsi is racist.
mm,
And arguments like that
well that
were
does that,
very effective.
yeah, and it makes the somewhat racist assumption that it's like, black people are the poor like okay, first off, there are more poor white people than there are poor black people. And I'd venture to say
In
there's
the
probably
US, yeah.
more poor white people than there are black people in total because, we're such a large portion of the population. So just this idea, it's like, well, if
Why are we
if
even
they're
talking about?
poor, they're black. And it's
Yeah,
just like,
yeah, yeah.
that's kind of
Why are
racist.
you even talking?
That seems like
Yeah,
you're
I like
saying like if they're black, they're poor.
great stereotype, bro. Yeah.
But it works though. Like, we're looking at
Oh, it definitely works. It
right
guilt
now.
trips people, and you don't want to step on that landmine.
Well, you don't
so
want
you're
to be a
just
racist because you
yeah,
might be a racist, so you got to just not be a racist, and it's
yep.
just like, yeah.
Boy,
But I don't know, like,
yeah. So let's catch up with our chats here because Ninja Bats made a few other points here. In the meantime,
like,
yeah, the pendulum can be a noose. I remember.
yeah,
Yeah, that's true. So, hence our Constitution. No man has authority over another unless consensual.
yeah, and I guess you could say that the food stamp recipient would be having authority to use a portion of an individual's money
Other people's money,
without
yeah,
their consent.
without their consent. That would be the argument
That
against
would that would
yeah.
and I would say that would actually be a pretty solid argument, and actually just a pretty solid argument about willy-nilly social programs
So how
too.
would we approach that? Talking to somebody about that with the Socratic method, then we would question. So
Um,
how did you come to this belief? Why is this important to you?
well, I guess if it was somebody who believes that food stamps and the
Mhm.
ability to buy whatever you want is the good thing, and be like, okay, well, first off, where do you think the money comes from?
Mm, yeah.
Uh,
Okay. Yeah. So we can get
so
into the
so then we can
conversation
decide
about
of like,
tax.
well, it comes from the
Yeah.
taxpayers, and it's like, are you personally okay with your money going towards junk food for that? You know,
Particularly if it means that we as a people are paying hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of
yeah,
dollars in medical bills for people that
and,
are having issues down the road
yeah,
because of the
and
diet.
then if you are, well, imagine you're, the uncle that you try not to talk politics with at the table. That's a conservative Trump supporter. How do you think he feels about it? And and
Mm.
depending on their answer, you could probably draw them into more of like, okay, come on, let's steel man him. Like, don't,
Yeah, yeah. Let's try to see it from his point of
you
view.
know,
Let's not just say because he's dumb or he's a racist or this or that he believes that thing. Let's try to really understand where is he coming from?
and
Why?
then ask them what are the consequences. It's like, okay, well, if we keep paying for the junk food, well,
Yes.
if they may get to the same point of like, well, yeah, people get sick off of it and they get the diabetes and all that. And the trick is to not lead them in that direction. You can mention it personally.
Mm.
It's like, don't you think it's expensive and kind of you know, or would you say that it is too expensive and detrimental to humanity to continue to use taxpayer dollars to fund
That's a little
junk
bit
food?
leading, but yeah,
Yeah,
there's
yeah. I'm
another way
trying to
to
figure
phrase
out a
that,
way
though.
to
There's
like
another way to phrase that, but that's
phrase it. It's like,
it's a fair point, though, and
yeah,
it actually leads us back to Ninja Bat's
right.
points here, talking about
Uh,
we're barely most foods are made to be addictive,
yeah.
barely healthy, and the children are sadly the most affected. So friggin' true.
Well, their brain is
Oh yeah,
hardwired to, like, you know why the kid's eating glue? Kid eats glue because he has a collagen
right.
deficiency.
Yeah,
You know why
yeah.
the kid's eating Play-Doh? Because he's malnourished. Because the
Salt or
salt.
something. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Like you crave salt when you're malnourished. So the kid eating
Mm.
Play-Doh is probably not getting enough to eat. So yeah, so the child brain doesn't, like it doesn't reason like, oh, it's like, well, why can't I eat cake and cookies all the time? You know?
Keep into the Socratic method now. Does the government have to be involved in helping the poor?
That's a good question.
No, it
And
depends on the people. What we here in the U.S. follow a Judeo-Christian ethic, which certainly does encourage
yeah,
us to do so. So, government or not, it's something that we've found to be important in our society.
yeah. So we're
And not to say that we are only Judeo-Christian, but that's what inspired the founding and
yeah.
the values of this nation.
Well,
The concept,
charity is
all
that.
people are created equal. Everybody has a right to a fair and speedy trial. Even if you almost certainly committed some heinous act, you still get to be treated fairly because everybody has an element of the divine or the sacred or
Mm,
some deep special worthiness to them because you're also a fellow human being. You are a fellow life.
yeah.
We're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, even if we're 99.9% sure, and then we're still going to also give you a fair punishment instead of an overzealous punishment. Very interesting idea. Now,
Yeah, so the whole keeping to the Socratic method topic, does the
mhm,
government
have to be,
have and that's with
yeah, quotes have to be involved.
in helping the poor. And a follow-up question that I'd ask is, are there other avenues that are
Yeah,
equally effective? And well, I don't believe the government's very effective at helping the poor, but equally or more effective. And Ninja Bet just put in, church donations, etc., soup kitchens, actually corporations. In during the Great Depression, these huge, massive robber baron corporations were actually the ones feeding people.
mm,
It wasn't
yeah,
government programs because the government didn't have any money.
yeah,
The soup kitchens were the churches and the corporations. And that, like, and there's plenty of, corporations now that do actually charitable work and outside of government
hmm.
influence. But now, there's a lot of meddling,
Or a lot of it's virtue signaling,
or
a
the
lot of it's
government's
PR.
paying,
Yeah,
paying them to pay it
yeah,
back over
yeah.
and do
Oh
all this
yeah,
stuff and
yeah, that
steal
too.
even more tax money. So,
Mm.
if I didn't have to pay 30% of my income in taxes, I'd gladly donate. Well, that's the thing is, if you take
Yeah, I
less,
know the feeling.
perhaps
Yeah,
if you take less money from people, they may be more willing to put their money into their community and help their community instead of feeling like they're bled.
right.
Because I can tell you, to get into another perspective, people are feeling like they're being bled, they don't have anything, and it's making them resentful.
Mm.
And there's this stereotype about the Chinese, particularly the older Chinese that went through communism, and it's not just a stereotype; it's a real thing. But when they go to buffets or when they have in China like food get-togethers and stuff like that, they're shoving each other out of the way and they're trying to get as much as possible because
Wow.
they had everything that was there stolen from them for the greater good of everybody. And when you got something, you had to take it. So naturally, when we're being stolen from, and our tendency is to be like, nah, like I'm not putting out there, and I'm going to take more because you're taking more from me.
Hmm.
And like I personally don't believe the government, except for a few exceptions, should force us to live under its hand of plenty
Mm.
because it
We
almost
should have emergency services available for people. We should have some programs
yeah.
to help uplift the poor, but we shouldn't be creating a nanny state where people become totally reliant
Well, and it does.
on the government. I guess is what you're saying.
Well, it doesn't seem to me. Well, actually, no. What I'm saying is the government creates the very systems that keep us, or it creates the very problem that we're dealing with.
So a poorly functioning government that's not, yeah,
Governments create poor people. That's what, like, the base of, I know that's a big statement, but it seems to me that the governments create poor people. And and I think the mechanism is through, what would you call it? Incentive to be poor. Like,
okay.
say, like, take it, like, with, like, if you
So
get, if you get welfare for not having a job, and they're giving you so much money, the people at, what is it, Health and Human Services will tell you, well, don't get the job unless you can get more than what we're giving you, because
Yeah.
then you're going to be broken out of luck again anyway. So it's like, okay, I'm going to stay on that. Oh, and you mean if I have a kid and I stay single, I can get even more money? And each time I have a kid, I can get even more money? And you're not allowed to say that, nowadays, because they're like, oh, you're talking about welfare queens. It's like, dude, and that's racist. It's like, dude, I've been to all the trailer parks in my area, and there's a lot of white women doing this too. Okay, so it isn't just a racist thing; it's just a thing that people
are doing.
And
Yeah.
I think the government knows what they're doing. Like,
So, but you made a very general statement. Governments create poor people. You mean
Yeah.
governments when they're not acting properly on behalf of their citizens, because citizens organize
Yeah,
governments to support
so
their intentionality.
I would say, the more
corrupt.
the more a government gets into the economy of the people. So governments that make it a point to get into the economy of the people, and part of that is giving welfare, but the other part is saying who can do what and who can't do what. It creates poor people. Because and I make this assumption. Well, I make this, not an assumption. Well, we'll call it an assumption. I make this assumption because, well, since capitalism, we've risen near the entire planet out of abject poverty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, half
Whereas
the planet.
the more control a government has, the more tyrannical it seems to be, and the more it takes from everybody,
Sure.
in the guise of helping the poor. And some governments are more open about, yeah, we don't care about the poor.
Yeah.
You could say, like,
It seems to me like our government is what is intended to be a system of self-governance run by and for the people has been actually infiltrated by corporate interests. So it no longer is even the government as it was intended when we founded it. It is something else now. And I think that greed run amok in governments, or the hunger for power in governments, has that same effect, right?
Yeah.
Anyways, we're playing around
Mhm.
with trying to understand the situation here, but I'm also trying to make sure I'm understanding your questions and demonstrate how to steel man and question and further.
Yeah. So, in a nutshell, the more the government gets its hands in helping the people, opposed to being like an arbiter when there's a disagreement between people,
Fair, okay.
the more it tends to create the problems that it tasks itself to fix.
Right.
And I do believe that it's actually intentional in the case of America and the welfare programs. And I do believe that welfare programs were put in there to keep black people poor. I'm not going to use the terminology, but what was his name?
Homicide?
No, the bad president who initialized all this stuff and said, I'm going to keep, we want to keep those N-words, or we're going to keep those N-words voting Democrat for the next 200 years. That's
oh geez, I haven't heard that quote.
3-letter name.
Are you talking about FDR?
FDR.
Okay,
I believe it was FDR or Lyndon Baines Johnson.
LBJ.
LBJ. It was LBJ. And when they were going around from house to house, making sure there wasn't a man in the house in these black communities that were receiving government's help, making sure there wasn't a man in the house. It's like, well,
these were Democrats too, right?
Oh yeah. But I just found out too, like, not having a man in the house, a father in the house, will actually shorten the telomeres of the children by up to 15% too. So on a genetic level, it affects them. It's not just social. Yeah. So
the lifespan.
Anyway, and then this is why I make this assertion and why I believe this in a nutshell. Because I've seen.
But this is good. So bringing up counter ideas, this is important because it's necessary to have our beliefs challenged in order for us to widen our perspective, to incorporate other perspectives, and to experience real learning and growth in ourselves. Otherwise, we are stultified. So these questioning techniques that we can utilize when we are engaging in Socratic dialogue, hypothetical questions, role switching questions, and devil's advocate questions. We've been demonstrating all of them throughout the podcast here. A hypothetical question, for instance, expands our thinking about moral dilemmas and encourages our own reflection and consideration of ethical uh, points of consideration. Role switching questions allow us to consider other perspectives.
Mm.
It allows empathy and a broader understanding of moral issues.
Sure.
So, willingness to put yourself in other people's shoes.
So, yeah,
Try and see from their perspective.
like
Why
with
are
the
they thinking
well,
that
like
way?
with the food stamps thing,
Yeah.
I could, what I did earlier was put myself in the perspective of, say, the poor person that lives in a food desert,
Yes.
and
Yes.
like, okay, well, they can't get the healthy food.
Mhm.
And I'll even go one further and put myself in the perspective of somebody who is making the argument for that person, but is not themselves. Well, they actually,
So the devil's advocate.
yeah, they do
Yeah.
to a certain degree do care about the poor,
Mm-hmm.
and they probably think that the best solution right now is the one we got, and that's the government
That's
doing it and not limiting the options of individuals because it's not fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Um,
doesn't seem fair. Like they should have the freedom to eat whatever they want,
yeah,
but
yeah.
then we remember, oh wait, other people
Yeah.
have to pay taxes for these food stamps to be available to
Yeah.
poor
And
people.
the
So
person making the argument that they should be able to eat, get the junk food off of this would be
want
okay with
yeah.
paying.
What if I only
yeah.
want my food stamps to be for
Okay.
nutritional food that helps people?
What about an opt-in
become healthier?
an opt-in
Yeah.
tax system? You get a list of the
Wow,
things,
what an
and then
idea.
you can.
What an idea.
Yeah, this
Yes.
is where I want my money to go.
But you
know.
still have to pay a certain amount in.
Yeah,
Yeah,
you
well,
just get to,
So you get to choose.
like,
I wonder if that would work.
roads,
and so-
infrastructure, other things, are standard. But,
Yeah. Yep. So devil's advocate questions is the third kind of question we can engage in. And BJ just gave us a great example. Challenge the initial conclusion by presenting counter arguments, which fosters critical thinking. So philosophical inquiry. We always start with what we know best. And if we're willing to admit our own ignorance about a wide number of topics, we can come into any discussion very open-minded and willing to upgrade our views, willing to be wrong, not taking that as something shameful or something to feel bad about or losing face or whatever. You have no problem with being wrong, man. The world becomes such a more comfortable place.
Oh,
If you're only interested in what is good and true for one and all, then that's a totally different game. Then you're excited when you find out you were wrong about something because, I just upgraded my information stack. Now I'm seeing from more points of view. I've literally widened my perspective, and my entire awareness is now wider.
yeah,
That's,
and
that's enlightenment in a nutshell right there. That's beautiful. Love and compassion allows us to do this.
if you go even further and allow yourself to enjoy the finding out that you're wrong.
Yeah.
I love it when you're having a conversation with somebody and they just like blow your mind and you just kind of get the giggles.
Yeah, and you're like,
Yeah,
man, you know
you're
what?
like,
Okay, that's a
yeah,
good point,
no,
man. That's a
no,
good
for
point.
real,
Okay, I'll
yeah,
give you that.
like,
Yeah.
And I love seeing that in other people too, because I do watch a lot of, conversational podcasts and stuff like that. And there's a lot of those moments, particularly when you get two people going really deep and heavy into
we
a
love
subject.
watching comedy because that's all that
Yeah,
comedy
yeah,
is too.
yeah.
That's all comedy is.
You make an
especially
assumption and
the
then you
guys that
prove
are really
wrong.
playing
Yeah.
on the edge and they say something that's a little bit
Yeah.
shocking, but it gets everybody to laugh. Even if they would have disagreed with the notion beforehand, the person presented it in such a logically coherent yet surprising way. It gets you to laugh and surprise and understanding, and
Mhm.
that's a beautiful thing. That's so cool that humans have this capacity. We are such socially advanced as a species, or we are so socially advanced as a species that we write poems and stories and create comedy and movies to entertain one another, and it's that's a profound thing to me.
And it's almost a drive to communicate.
Yes, we want to
Um,
commune so badly.
Oh, communicate.
Yes.
Ah,
Yeah, and we want to get that communion level of communication
Yeah.
back, and that you can only do that when you have empathy.
Mhm.
So let's look at Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. demonstrating this kind of selflessness.
And really seeming to be humbling himself before the people he is going to lead
Yes,
to, which
yes.
is very important.
So check out this Socratic invitation.
Let me say one more thing about politicization, and this is personal.
Oh, let me slow this down, guys. I was listening to this a little bit fast
Yeah.
earlier.
I didn't even notice.
Yeah, I could tell by his movement, though, man. It's like, wait, Slow down there,
You
buddy.
drank some coffee, man.
Turn off these closed captions since you can't see them all anyway. Here we are, guys.
Let me say one more thing about politicization, and this is personal. As you know, I've come through a very highly polarized confirmation process. The fog of narrative warfare has made it hard to get a sense of who I am and what I believe and what I represent. A lot of times when I read these articles characterizing me, I think to myself, I wouldn't want to work for that guy either. So,
It's a different perspective.
since we all are here together, I have a request to make from you, my new colleagues. Let's start a relationship by letting go of any preconceptions that you may have about me, and let's start from square one. Let's establish a mutual intention to work toward what we all care about, the health of the American people. In return, I want to make a promise to all of you. It's also about preconceptions. I'll start by acknowledging that throughout my career, I've asked a lot of difficult questions, and I've come to a lot of unpopular conclusions. I'm going to keep asking those kind of questions. What I promise to you now is to hold my preconceived answers lightly. I promise to be willing to be wrong. I promise to listen to all the stakeholders, all the parties to the conversation, including the ones, especially the ones with whom I've disagreed in the past. I promise to keep an open mind toward every possibility and every contingency. I hope you will all join me in this commitment because the health of our people is a lot more important than being right or being vindicated. We can start right now. Last Thursday, President Trump signed an executive order to establish the Maha Commission.
Okay, so now he goes on. This is actually, so Kennedy delivering his welcome remarks to the Health and Human Services staff. This is a really powerful speech that he has here. It's only 20 minutes, guys. I'm going to make sure that I put this link in the description for you all. And I'm going to get that in there now, in fact, that it's accessible because I don't think I saved it.
Yeah, so what he did, like, mind you, he wasn't asking questions because that was not the purpose, but
it's an invitation.
he delved into a different perspective. I was reading the stuff about me and I wouldn't want to work for me. He then challenged their assumptions and at the same time clarified this concept.
There it is, guys. The description.
Sweet.
He did, didn't he?
Yeah, and he did those pretty much at the same time with, it's just like, well, look, give me a chance. I'll show you that I'm not the person that's written. Yeah. And he clarified, this is what I'm planning,
So that's the
my
orientation
promise to you.
And that's a great example of the posture to take when we're engaging in Socratic dialogue. And let's hold him accountable. Let's genuinely hold this gentleman accountable. Let's hold whoever is president and whoever is in our Congress accountable, no matter how much we like them. And let's take honest looks and humble ourselves to try and understand those with whom we have visceral disagreements as well, because there might be something that we're missing. They might not be as evil as they've been depicted to us or as we're seeing them ourselves. There's so much characterization going on nowadays, and everybody is being seen through these low resolution glasses now. It's like we don't even have clear conceptions of one another. We're automatically prejudging whole groups of individuals, and not seeing the individual for the depth that they possess. We're just seeing these very surface level, overgeneralized distinctions and judging people according to what party they're a member of, or what skin color they have, or what sex they are, or what their belief system is. And this is so shallow.
And to be,
it's unfortunate.
To be fair to the idea of what was the term that you used? My brain just went. What do you call it? What do you call it? Like 1080p resolution. Okay, resolution. So you can't. To be fair, you can't have an infinite resolution all the time, and treat everybody as individuals and go directly down into it, we do have to have a certain amount of generalization in our resolution. However, that changes from like when you're when you're dealing with a large group of people
readily.
You're engaging in a different resolution and understanding.
Yeah. You're not trying to track every individual person.
Yeah,
you're tracking the group.
So like the comedian, right? The comedian's working the room.
But then he's gonna zoom in sometimes though on a specific person.
Yeah. Whereas if you get the comedian talking with, say, another comedian or something like that, then that's a different level of resolution that he's using to understand this other individual. And it's going back to the Vervaeke days, it's the optimization of resolution.
Yes.
Not too much resolution and not too little resolution, right?
And not using either all at once. You have to be willing to constantly kind of calibrate that process. Zoom in, zoom back out.
To be fair,
zoom back out.
A low resolution is usually good enough.
Yeah.
Good enough for the day-to-day and get by. But
just getting the gestalt.
But when it gets too low resolution where it's just like, well, like say the racism, racism I would say is a very low resolution way of looking at people, and a too low of resolution.
Right.
Now you could realize, you could increase your resolution. Man, saying that over and over again is killing me. You could increase your resolution and be like, okay, well, certain people in certain neighborhoods exhibit certain behaviors on a certain amount of a certain percentage, right, per capita.
Right.
But then you could go even further and you could be like, well, actually, it's young men in these areas during these periods of time that have this factor, this factor, this factor, this factor. And that's like, now you're increasing your resolution to the point where you can help. You can't go too far into it unless, say, you're a personal counselor that works with maladjusted young inner city men.
Right.
Or boys. So like, but as far as like the person watching on TV, keep it just enough where you can realize that, not all people who look the same, not all white people are racists, just all the racist white people. Just the only ones who are actually racist, right?
Not all Republicans are racist, or not even all Trump voters. And in fact, maybe there's a very low percentage of them.
Yeah.
Are we even willing to consider that potential? So we've got to continually humble ourselves in this process when we're trying to understand those with whom we disagree. Otherwise, we're leading ourselves towards war. It ends in violence, inevitably, if we don't learn how to talk together and figure these things out together once again. So and
there was a good question here that Ninja Bet put. So how do you inspire those who have been disenfranchised back to the spirit of compassion? All I'd have to say is probably example.
Absolutely, I was going to say the same thing, man.
The best thing I can come up with, right?
By adopting that orientation ourselves more and more and become an expert at it. It's hard. It's hard as heck to do because it's so easy to get riled up, especially when people are as demeaning as they are nowadays. Socrates' last words, I drank what? Like that. Yeah, there's Kimber giving us the LBJ.
Yeah, it was LBJ. Kim. Thank you.
Yeah. I just hope that there are not any wolves in sheep's clothing with RFK Jr. So do we, man. Yeah.
I think I've finally got.
We should always be wary of that.
Yeah, I think I got to the point where I don't think he's a sheep. I don't really worry about whether he's a wolf in sheep's clothing anymore.
Now, can he be trapped? Is he someone that can be trapped? I think with his history,
I'm thinking more hamstringed by the wolves in sheep's clothing, as in he has good
well, he's
intents,
going to be hamstringed. We know that's coming. But yeah, so I think this is a pretty good point to end this episode, guys. I think we've covered just about everything. I have one more thing I could present to you.
And we are not masters of the Socratic Method by any means, but it is good to try to remind ourselves to do this more and more and more.
Yeah. In fact, let's just
rock it up one more time.
Recapitulate our understanding here. So how can the Socratic Method aid in times of social division and ideological capture? It can help us expose assumptions and biases. The social division and ideological capture occurs when our communities or ourselves as individuals become deeply entrenched in fixed beliefs, rejecting the opposing viewpoints, allowing ourselves to be polarized and caught up in echo chambers and groupthink. These dynamics lead us to increasing hostility, misunderstanding, and stall progress on the shared challenges. that we all do face together. The Socratic Method, with its emphasis on questioning and dialogue, offers a powerful tool to bridge divides, challenge rigid ideologies, and foster understanding. So this can help save us from being ideologically possessed. It can help us heal the divisions in our cultures. So we want to expose assumptions, even within ourselves and our own biases. We want to break that ideological capture. This is what happens when people adopt beliefs uncritically. We might think we're being critical, but we're not looking at other information that could challenge our point of view. We're not being so critical. This occurs often due to social pressure or propaganda. Propaganda, anybody, I believe, can be lied to nowadays. Doesn't matter how intelligent you are, because we can all be very effectively emotionally manipulated by these sophistication of the psychological operation techniques that are being utilized these days.
And the tricky thing with propaganda is it's not always a lie.
No, sometimes it's just a very clever part truth that's leading you in the wrong direction,
Or just
too.
hypersalience
Or
on
hypersalient.
something,
Yep,
you
that
know.
happens too. Yeah, it's just so bright and attractive that you don't even care if it's not real. So yeah, so break that ideological capture. The benefit here, it's going to disrupt those echo chambers and encourage critical examination of these dominant narratives, foster a willingness to reconsider entrenched views. This is beautiful. We need this. And we
Mhm.
need to build more empathy and community.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So we're here emphasizing collaborative dialogue and active listening, not rather than confrontation. Questions like, can you share why this issue matters to you personally? Or what experiences shaped your perspective? To invite vulnerability and understanding. That totally changes the orientation and the trajectory of the conversation. It humanizes opposing viewpoints. We have to see each other as human. We got to stop this dehumanizing game, because it only leads one place, and it's a very scary, dark place if we let it go there.
No, death and
Right?
destruction.
You would think that we
Yes.
learned enough about this in the 20th century. But yeah, here we are again. So the benefit in times of social fracture, such as post-crisis tensions or cultural disagreements, building empathy and community fosters connection by focusing on shared goals. Boom. Builds trust and reduces hostility. This is what we need. And we need to promote critical thinking over emotion. By focusing on actual logic, evidence, reasoned analysis, the Socratic method shifts discussions away from emotional reactions or tribal loyalty. Questions like, what data supports this claim? Or how does this align with your broader values? Encourages participants to prioritize facts over feelings. Of course, the benefit here is it helps us move beyond knee-jerk responses and polarized environments. It helps us to reduce the grip of ideological silos. And then, of course, facilitating structured dialogue. The Socratic method can be structured through formats like Socratic seminars, the practice of dialogos, where participants are agreed to ask questions rather than make statements, literally with the intention to figure something out together, following rules like active listening and evidence-based reasoning. The benefit, the structure is ideal for community forums, family discussions, online platforms,
Pretty much
addressing
everywhere.
the divisive issues. Yep, everywhere.
Even by yourself. You
Yeah.
can do this to yourself.
Yeah, reduces shouting matches and promotes mutual understanding as well. And yes, we can do this to ourselves.
Now, sometimes if you have a friend that you're close with and you can do this, it's cool to have a shouting match. Love
Yeah.
you, Mr. Bill. You're no longer with us, but we had some great shouting matches. Oh,
Yep.
boy, that was fun.
Yep. And these things can be misused too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, stultification takes on a nuanced twist in the context of the Socratic method. The Socratic method, where questioning drives dialogue to uncover truth or expose assumptions, aims to sharpen critical thinking. It's about prodding, challenging, and waking up the mind through active engagement. Stultification, however, is its antithesis. It's what Socrates himself would have railed against. It's if the method were misused or misunderstood, it could ironically lead to further stultification instead of enlightenment. For instance, if a teacher wielded Socratic questioning not to inspire, but to shut down thought, say by relentlessly badgering without guiding towards insight, it could dull a student's curiosity rather than ignite it. Picture a dialogue where the questions just circle endlessly, leaving everyone confused and disengaged, or where the method becomes a rote exercise stripped of its dynamic spirit. That's stultification creeping in, the mind being numbed instead of being provoked to insight, to find insight on its own.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, Socrates feared this. He
Yeah.
saw stultification in the unexamined life. So like you were saying, we can do this to ourselves. People coasting on autopilot, accepting dogma without wrestling with it, they're definitely not engaging in enough self-reflection, what it seems. So Socratic method, it's meant to break that cycle. Now, if it's applied mechanically or oppressively, it risks becoming the very thing it opposes, just like any tool.
Yeah, it's a tool.
That
Like
would stifle instead of liberate.
it's a cognitive tool that was developed. I won't say just by him, but he was the one we're going to say developed it because he's the one that refined it and we associate with it. But, you know, he learned these ideas from other people in his life. And, you know, every good inventor of a good philosophy, cognitive tool or other tool learned from other people, compiled, combined and refined.
Right. There you go.
You know, and that's one of the wonderful reasons to get into philosophy and psychology is not just so you can like, oh, I read so and so. It's like, no, you can get in on the conversation and you can start to build your own tools too. You know, and you know, you got a whole toolbox to build more tools. It's great. You know, and there's ever more tools. Some tools not as good as others, but you learn. You know? Yes,
but we are here to change this world from the inside out. It's the most effective way we have found to be able to create lasting change. The world. So let's take that on, fam.
Ninja Bat said Joe Rogan seems to have been the podcast groundbreaker with the Socratic method.
Dude, that's a great point. And actually, he's really good at asking those open-ended questions.
And I wonder if he
being genuinely curious, even with people he might have disagreement.
Yeah, and I wonder if he does it intentionally, like knowing it's the Socratic method. I'm sure he knows what it is now because he's had so many philosophers and other
cares.
People.
But that's why it works, is because he cares.
Yeah, and he
wants to know, and he's willing to be humble.
The camera just died on us,
guys.
Oh
my goodness, yeah. We went the entire episode without that happening, but this camera tends to overheat at times. So our apologies, guys. I'm going to get a heat sink for this thing that we can stick on. And
hey, I'm back. Yeah, guys.
We're back. Yo, just to say goodbye, really. We're winding down here, fam. But yo, thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of Meaning Making 101 here on Actuali Podcast. This is our weekly live stream series. We do this every Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we'd love for you to join us and smash that like and subscribe if you appreciate what we're doing here. And go out there and change this world from the inside out, fam.
Yep.
Let's realize what that actual I is. What is that deepest sense of self before all ideas and descriptions, before your conditioning, before your thoughts? What is it that sees the thoughts and the emotions? Inquire within. Engage in some meditative practice. Let us pray with a deep sense of reverence. Let us reconnect to that sense of the sacred, and let's love one another and ourselves once again. And let's do this thing.
Yep.
Love you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time. I've been Chris.
I've been DJ.
We out. Go ahead and dance on out. We got the music today. Let's go.
Yeah,
that's right.
Let me show you that Socratic method. Now we're dancing in the corner because oh boy. If it's not
the button. There it is.
See you guys later.
Peace, fam. Love you guys.